This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nita Hone, and it's Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10, the series where I normally rank cards based on their historical performance at Magic's highest level of competition. However, I like to change things up from time to time, and today I'm doing a subjective list rather than one based on empirical data. In today's top 10, I'm giving my picks for the 10 most flavorful mechanics in the game. Keep in mind, how good these mechanics are is not a consideration. Instead, the main focus here is simply on flavor. In fact, some of the mechanics on this list are normally not considered good at all. Instead, they make the list simply because I feel that what these mechanics do is a great reflection of what it is they are trying to represent. With each of these mechanics, I'll do my best to explain why I think they're so flavorful. Alright, let's get to number 10. At number 10, I have Flying and Horsemanship. If you're not familiar with Horsemanship, it's a mechanic that appeared in Portal 3 Kingdoms that is pretty much the same thing as Flying. 3 Kingdoms was a standalone set during the 3 Kingdoms period of Chinese history. Because it's based on reality, the set couldn't have flying, but horsemanship worked there. Both of these mechanics make it so creatures that have them can only be blocked by other creatures who possess the keyword. It doesn't do anything super fancy or complex, but this is among one of the most intuitive mechanics in the game. Worth noting that intuitiveness and flavor don't always go hand in hand, but it does here. It makes perfect sense to most new players that something that flies can't be blocked by things that don't fly, and I think that makes it one of the game's most flavorful mechanics. At number 9, I have Soul Bond. This mechanic allows 2 of your creatures to, well, bond. Creatures with Soul Bond generally have some additional effect that they lend to the creature that is bonded with it, and they also gain some benefit from doing so. And as long as those 2 creatures stay in play, they continue to be soul bonded. The bond is broken when you lose control of one of them in any way, but Soul Bond can happen again if a creature enters the battlefield when another creature with Soul Bond is already on your side of the table. While the mechanic is somewhat complicated in terms of its functionality, I think it does a great job of conveying what it's supposed to, flavor-wise. The mechanic debuted in Avacyn Restored, and it conveys the fact that everyone on the plane of Innistrad who didn't want to be killed or eaten by the scary creatures of the plane were willing to work together, and when they did, they were a more effective fighting force against the gothic monsters of the plane. At number 8, I have Tribute. This is a mechanic to make the list that is generally not a particularly good one in terms of power, but I think it is great flavor-wise. Creatures with Tribute demand that your opponent pay them in the currency of +1/+1 counters, and if they don't pay them, they have a powerful enter the battlefield effect. The reason this mechanic didn't really work out is because it was almost always right to pay the tribute, but I think giving your opponent an option between these 2 things is right on target for a mechanic called Tribute. At number 7, it is Infect, a mechanic that not everybody loves, but the reason people don't like it has nothing to do with its flavor. Instead, there are many people who think it's overpowered, but regardless of all of that, the mechanic does have great flavor. Creatures with Infect are those on the plane of Mirrodin who have been corrupted by the Phyrexians who are invading the plane and scars of Mirrodin. Their infections are something that they can spread. They do damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and they do damage to players in the form of poison counters. When this poison becomes too much for you to handle, in other words, when you have 10 poison counters, you die and the game ends regardless of how much life you have. This does a great job of conveying the corrupting nature of the Phyrexians and shows how this infection has managed to spread across the plane of Mirrodin. At number 6, I have Haunt, the signature Orzhov mechanic from Guild Pact. Many of the members of the Orzhov Syndicate are ghosts, so it makes perfect sense that when Orzhov creatures die, they don't really die. Instead, they haunt another creature. Most creatures with Haunt have an enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield ability, and this effect gets repeated when the haunted creature dies. To me, this sort of conveys that the death of the creature was caused, at least in part, by the creature haunting it, as it gets to have an impact on the board after the creature it haunts dies. At number 5, I have Embalm and Eternalize, which are very similar mechanics from Amonkhet blocks, so I chose to include them together. Amonkhet is, of course, an Egyptian-inspired plane, so having a mechanic like Embalm, which is based on the process of mummification, is pretty neat. Creatures with Embalm have an ability that can be used in the graveyard, which embalms them. Instead of simply having the creature return to play or something like that, The design here has the creature come back instead as a white zombie creature token version of its former self. Basically, creatures with Embalm let you choose whether or not you want to mummify them later in the game. Embalm showed up in Amonkhet, and Eternalize made its debut in Hour of Devastation. Eternalize is not based so much on actual Egyptian culture, but you can see that it is something of an echo of the Embalm mechanic, only it has been corrupted in this case by Nicol Bolas. Creatures with Embalm no longer come back as white creature tokens that are simply copies of their former selves. Now they are black creature tokens, and they all have base stats of 4/4. The Eternals, of course, turned out to be Nicol Bolas' army, which he made out of the beings of Amonkhet that managed to pass the various gods' trials. We know now that his ultimate plan was to use these beings to invade Ravnica, where he started the War of the Spark. At number 4, it is Ninjutsu, a mechanic that only creatures with the ninja creature type possess, and it does a great job of conveying the attributes of speed and stealth that ninjas are known for. If you attack with a creature and your opponent doesn't block it, if you happen to have a ninja in your hand, you can pay the ninjutsu cost, which effectively makes the ninja suddenly appear on the battlefield in the place of the original unblocked creature, and then the ninja all of a sudden is hitting your opponent. The ability is made even more interesting and flavorful because most ninjas have an ability that triggers when they hit the opponent. This is a mechanic I really want to see more of in the near future. I'm glad we got to see a little bit of it in Modern Horizons at least. At number 3, I have Devotion, a mechanic that we have only seen on the plane of Theros. Your devotion to a color is equal to however many mana symbols of a given color you have on the permanents you control. I think that from the start, the way devotion works is fairly intuitive. Being devoted to a single color makes sense, but I think where the flavor really makes sense is when we look at the gods of Theros. Theros is a plane based on Greek culture, history, and mythology, so the plane is occupied by several gods, all of whom require you to reach a certain amount of devotion for them to actually become creatures. If not enough people believe in them, they can only exist in a more abstract sense, as enchantments on the battlefield, but once the devotion gets there, they become huge, indestructible monsters. Basically, the gods are willing to intervene and help you, but only if they feel like your devotion to them is high enough, and you have to prove that to them by having lots of mana symbols of the same color on your side of the battlefield. At number 2, it is Emerge, a mechanic that made its debut in Eldritch Moon. Eldritch Moon is an expansion set on the plane of Innistrad, and it is the set where it was revealed that Eldrazi corruption, particularly from Emrakul, was infiltrating the plane and causing all kinds of problems. One of these issues was that people were slowly being corrupted by Eldrazi, until the point where strange Eldrazi physically emerged from their bodies as beings that shared traits with their initial hosts, but were also Eldrazi. Creatures with Emerge ask you to play their Emerge cost, and they also want you to sacrifice a creature. The Emerge cost is then reduced based on the converted mana cost of the creature that is sacrificed. The flavor here is that the sacrificed creature has met its death because one of these eldritch horrors has emerged from their body. I think they did a great job with the design on these. And at number 1, I have double-faced cards, which I think in a technical sense aren't exactly a mechanic or a keyword. I guess that would be transform, but you know what I mean here. And I think that double-faced cards in general are one of the most innovative and flavorful things Wizards has ever done. Double-faced cards made their original debut on the plane of Ravnica, where they conveyed the fact that creatures on the plane have a dual nature, changing over time or depending on whether it is night or day, with werewolves being the biggest example. Creatures on Innistrad transform and become something much scarier on the other side. Double-faced cards really enhance the ability of cards being able to tell a whole story, since it shows the same creature at different points in time and all on one card. The flavor possibilities here are really neat. For a while, double-faced cards looked like they would only show up on Innistrad, but since then, the design team has found some other really interesting ways to use them. For example, they've used them to tell the story of planeswalkers both before and after their spark was ignited, something we've seen both in Magic Origins and Core Set 2019. We also saw them in Ixalan block, where they were used to help tell stories of exploration. In Ixalan, the double-faced cards were legendary enchantments on the front that conveyed the quest to find a specific location. You then had to fulfill some requirements, at which point you finally discovered the place, and your legendary enchantment transformed into a powerful legendary land. There were also tools of exploration in the set, all of which are double-faced artifacts that could transform into lands. The idea being that you use this particular instrument to find some important location. Wizards has said that double-faced cards are now deciduous, meaning we will see them with regularity, but not in every set. And I'm pretty happy about that, as they have some of the most flavorful designs in the entire game. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. What mechanics do you think are the most flavorful? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you need to catch up on the almost 300 other MTG Top 10s I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.